60 seconds. That's how long we're required to stand on the metal circles before the sound of a gong releases us. Step off before the minute is up and landmines blow your legs off. 60 seconds to take in the ring of tributes, all equidistant from the cornucopia. A giant golden horn shaped like a cone with a curved tail, the mouth of which is at least 7 meters high, spilling over with the things that will give us life here in the arena. Food, containers of water, weapons, medicine, garments, fire starters. Strewn around the cornucopia are the supplies, their value decreasing the further they are from the horn. For instance, only a few steps from my feet lies a metre of square of plastic. Certainly, it could be of some use in a downpour. But there in the mouth, I can see a tent pack that would protect me from almost any sort of weather, if I had the guts to go in and fight for it against the other 23 tributes, which I've been instructed not to do. We're on a flat, open stretch of ground, a plain of hard-packed dirt. Behind the tributes, across from me, I could see nothing, indicating either a steep downward slope or even a cliff. To my right lies a lake. To my left and back, sparse, piney woods. This is where Hamish would want me to go, immediately.
Perhaps she won't be there, said Michael. Yes, she will, said Jane. She's always there, forever and ever. They were walking up Ludgate Hill on the way to pay a visit to Mr. Banks in the city, for he had said that morning to Mrs. Banks, "My dear, if it doesn't rain, I think Jane and Michael might call for me at the office today. That is, if you are agreeable. I have a feeling I should like to be taken for tea and shortbread fingers, and it's not often I have a treat." And Mrs. Banks had said she would think about it. But all day long, though Jane and Michael had watched her anxiously, she had not seemed to be thinking about it at all. From the things she said, she was thinking about the laundry bill, and Michael's new overcoat, and where was Aunt Flossie's address, and why did that wretched Mrs. Jackson ask her to tea on the second Thursday of the month, when she knew that that was the very day Mrs. Banks had decided to go to the dentist's. Suddenly, when they were quite sure she would never think about Mrs. Banks's treat, she said, "Now, children, don't stand staring at me like that. Get your things on. You are going to the city to have tea with your father. Had you forgotten?" As if they could have forgotten, for it was not as though it was the only tea that mattered. It was only the tea that mattered. There was also the bird woman, and she herself was the best of all treats.
There's someone outside the door. It's opening. Is it Mum? No, it wasn't Mum. It never is. It was Cam. I took one look at Cam and burst into tears. Well, I wouldn't have done it if I was a crying sort of person. "Oh dear," said Cam. "I don't seem to have a very good effect on you, Tracy." She sat down right on the floor beside me, waiting for me to quieten down a bit. Then she dug into a pocket of her jeans and found a crumpled tissue. She passed it to me and I mopped up my hay fever. "Now," said Cam, "what do you want to do?" "I haven't got any choice, have I? I'm stuck here." "No, you're not. You can come out with me. I've asked Jenny." Elaine explained why you got upset. "She doesn't know. I hate the idea of you lot all blabbing about me," I said fiercely. "She doesn't know." Yes, it must be a bit annoying," said Cam. "Still, at least it means you're at the centre of everyone's attention. Here you've got a runny nose. Good job you weren't wearing your makeup this time." "Are you laughing at me?" "Just a little tease. You coming?" "You bet." Only I still felt bothered about my mum. Even though I knew she almost definitely wasn't coming, I knew deep, deep down that Justine might be right about her, but I still worried.
Something little and black scuttled across the floor. The door creaked and cracked for a moment before it was still. Dust poured through the torch beam. Something scratched and scratched in the corner. I tiptoed further in and felt spiderwebs breaking on my brow. Everything was packed in tight. Ancient furniture, kitchen units, rolled up carpets, pipes and crates and planks. I kept ducking under the hose pipes and ropes and kit bags that hung from the roof. More cobwebs snapped on my clothes and skin. The floor was broken and crumbly. I opened a cupboard an inch, shone the torch on, and saw a million wood lice scattering away. I peered down into a great stone jar and saw the bones of some little animal that died in there. Dead blue bottles were everywhere. There were ancient newspapers and magazines. I shone the torch onto one and saw that it came from nearly 50 years ago. I moved on so carefully. I was scared that every moment the whole thing was going to collapse. There was dust clogging my throat and nose. I knew they'd be yelling for me soon, and I knew I'd better get out. I leaned across a heap of tea chests and shone the torch into the space behind, and that's when I saw him. I thought he was dead. He was sitting with his legs stretched out, his head tipped against the wall. He was covered in dust and webs like everything else, and his face was thin and pale. Dead blue bottles were scattered on his hair and shoulders. I shone the torch on his white face and his black suit. "What do you want?" he said. He opened his eyes and looked up at me. His voice squeaked like he hadn't used it in years. "What do you want?" I then heard him yelling for me from the house. "Michael! Michael! Michael!" I shuffled out again. I backed out through the door.
I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but first impressions are often entirely wrong. You can look at a painting for the first time, for example, and not like it at all. But after looking at it a little longer, you might find it very pleasing. The first time you try gorgonzola cheese, you may find it too strong. But when you're older, you may want to eat nothing but gorgonzola cheese. Klaus, when Sunny was born, did not like her at all, but by the time she was 6 weeks old, the two of them were as thick as thieves. Your initial opinion on just about anything may change over time. I wish I could tell you that the Baudelaire's first impressions of Count Olaf and his house were incorrect, as first impressions so often are. But these impressions that Count Olaf was a horrible person and his house a depressing pigsty were absolutely correct. During the first few days after the orphans' arrival at Count Olaf's, Violet, Klaus and Sunny attempted to make themselves feel at home, but it was really no use. Even though Count Olaf's house was quite large, the three children were placed together in one filthy bedroom that had only one small bed in it. Violet and Klaus took turns in sleeping in it, so that every other night one of them was in the bed and the other was sleeping on the hard wooden floor. As the bed's mattress was so lumpy, it was difficult to say who was more uncomfortable. To make a bed for Sunny, Violet removed the dusty curtains from the curtain rod that hang over the bedroom's one window and bunched them together to form a sort of cushion just big enough for her sister. However, without curtains over the cracked glass, the sun streamed through the window every morning so that the children woke up early and saw each day. Instead of a closet, there was a large cardboard box that had once held a refrigerator and would now hold the three children's clothes, all piled in a heap. Instead of toys, books, or other things to amuse the youngsters, Count Olaf had provided a small pile of rocks, and the only decoration on the peeling walls was a large and ugly painting of an eye, matching the one on Count Olaf's ankle and all over the house.
As we raced over the sea, Annabeth and I tried to send an iris message to Chiron. We figured it was important to let somebody know what Luke was doing, and we didn't know who else to trust. The wind from the flask stirred up a nice sea spray that made a rainbow in the sunlight, perfect for an iris message, but our connection was still poor. When Annabeth threw a gold drachma into the mist and prayed for the rainbow goddess to show us Chiron, his face appeared all right, but there was some kind of weird strobe light flashing in the background, and rock music blaring, like he was at a dance club. We told him about sneaking away from the camp, and Luke and the Princess Andromeda, and the golden box for Kronos' remains. But between the noise on his end and the rushing wind and water on our end, I'm not sure how much he heard. "Percy," Chiron yelled, "you have to watch out for..." His voice was drowned out by loud shouting behind him, a bunch of voices whooping it up like Comanche warriors. "What?" I yelled. "Curse my relatives!" Chiron ducked as a plate flew over his head and shattered somewhere out of sight. "Annabeth, you shouldn't have let Percy leave camp, but if you do get the fleece..." "Yeah, baby," somebody behind Chiron yelled. The music got cranked up, subwoofers so loud it made our boat vibrate. "Miami," Chiron was yelling. "I'll try and keep watch..." Our misty screen smashed apart like someone on the other side had thrown a bottle at it, and Chiron was gone.
Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say they were perfectly normal, thank you very much. They were the last people you'd expect to be involved in anything strange or mysterious, because they just didn't hold with such nonsense. Mr. Dursley was the director of a film called Grunnings, which made drills. He was a big, beefy man with hardly any neck, although he did have a very large moustache. Mrs. Dursley was thin and blonde and had nearly the usual amount of neck, which came in very useful as she spent so much of her time craning over garden fences, spying on the neighbours. The Dursleys had a small son called Dudley, and in their opinion there was no finer boy anywhere. The Dursleys had everything they wanted, but they also had a secret, and their greatest fear was that somebody would discover it.